My friends, another day, another Saturday or Sunday, I don't even know what day it is today, and another wisdom stream, another attempt to connect with something bigger than us, something that is beyond us, something that will, like a cat, who has to sharpen its claws against something to feel real. Mr. Robbins, is this why cats kind of claw furniture and shit? Are they trying to connect with something real?
I've never put that together before, but it sounds completely plausible to me.
Okay, well, yes, let's just roll with it. I mean, I'm completely out of it and I had no good introduction. However, I do have a quote for you to reflect upon, Mr. Robbins. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, a young woman finds pleasure in love. A young man finds pleasure in sex. An old man finds pleasure in his memoirs. This is the doctrine of the three pleasures. Mr. Robbins, would you like to take a guess about the type of a person who uttered these words?
I have no clue.
Well, take a guess.
A writer, a famous writer of some sort.
This is actually Drukpa Kunli. Does this name ring a bell?
No, not at all.
Oh, he introduced. He's the major lama, the major yogi, the major saint, if you will, of Buddhism in the country of Bhutan. And this is another thing here. I am I am happy that I am a free yogi. So I grow more and more into my inner happiness. I can have sex with many women because I help them to go the path of enlightenment. Outwardly, I'm a fool, and inwardly, I live with clear spiritual system. Outwardly, I enjoy wine, women, and song, and inwardly, I work for the benefit of all beings. Outwardly, I live for my pleasure, and inwardly, I do everything in the right moment. Outwardly, I'm a ragged beggar, and inwardly, a blissful Buddha. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Robbins?
Well, that's kind of a nice justification for doing about anything that you want.
Yes, this is the Vajrayana, Mr. Robbins. This would sound very strange in, let's say, Sri Lanka, where the terrorist attacks took place, because they're in a different school of Buddhism. And then Vajrayana, an advanced practitioner, goes beyond the line of good and evil, and in fact goes beyond the archetypes. They smash the archetypes and they can live like that, or are they living a lie? And this is a question we're going to be examining here for the next 2 hours. Is Vajrayana the anyway, that was just a joke. Maybe I scared somebody with this. What we're going to do instead, Mr. Robbins, is something, in a sense, something that brought up, there were some kind of notes of masculinity in these words from the famous Bhutanese yogi. There was a kind of a sense of like what is an old man's pleasure is in his memoirs, right? There was something in there of our search, right, Mr. Robbins?
As a person who makes an attempt at writing, yeah, it made a bit of sense.
Yeah. Okay. I guess he did this right. He wasn't completely worthless. He did point something out.
Exactly.
But here what we do on YouTube, of course, is search for our manliness. I mean, we have a lot of amazing role models and figures for masculinity here. Of course, the Canadian academic Professor Peterson and Stefan Molyneux, and of course Sargon, who now is leading into politics. He will become the mayor of Europe. Apparently, if things keep going like that, I won't even rape you. I won't even vote for this. How about that? Maybe something like that. And one aspect of masculinity, of course, is confronting your nemesis, confronting your enemy, and potentially physically when the time calls for it. This is what animals do in the wild. And this is how perhaps we can connect with something elemental within ourselves, Mr. Robbins, right?
Okay.
Yes.
That
And
sounds
most
great.
of the yeah, and most of the time Mr. Robbins and I interact, it sounds like nothing like this. It's mostly like kind of dry mumbling, a kind of a two schizophrenic, some Thorazine, kind of making small talk and just puffing on cigarettes, even if we don't actually do that, and I have my vaping device. But this is sort of the tempo, the beat, the slow kind of horrible R&B Thorazine beat of our communications with Mr. Robbins when the cameras are off. And during one of these exchanges, we were sitting at Raising Cane's Chicken, and for some reason, I've asked Mr. Robbins if he has ever been in a fight in his adult life. And the story that followed was truly amazing. I mean, I've never heard anything quite like it, Mr. Robbins. I mean, it was just, I guess it's, I don't know, what is there an archetype? Is there a narrative arc to this story, like a moral you want to present before telling it?
No, I've never tried to fit it into any sort of Jungian archetypical narrative at all. Uh,
Oh, okay.
so,
All right. Well, fuck it. Okay. Well, let's get to it, Mr. Robbins. Let's hear it.
well, as the story goes, I was driving home after work in the winter, and it started to snow very hard and very suddenly. And to get to my apartment, I had to drive up a really steep and winding road, which I knew would be very slick. And at the time, I was driving a Mustang, uh, which is rear wheel drive, which is sort of worst case scenario for a position like that. So at the bottom of the hill, I really gunned it and tried to get as much momentum as I could. And as I was making it up the hill, I neared the top, and there was a car right in front of me that the entire time I kept thinking, go, go, go. But I got, like I say, right at the crest of the hill, and I had to pump the brakes because this guy was going so slow, and that caused me to slide back. So I
Mm-hmm.
slid backward on the winding road and went into the ditch and got stuck. So from there, this was the days before cell phones, so I don't even know how I got about. I think I went to somebody's house, made a phone call. The wrecker came, yanked my car out of the ditch. So I finally made it home, maybe an hour to 2 hours late. And
Late for what? Just from
well,
work?
yeah, later than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just, furious, in a rage over everything that happened, from, my car getting slightly damaged from getting pulled out, from that idiot who didn't know that, like, in a circumstance like that, like, gun it to get it up the hill. So I got home and parked down the street from the apartment where I was living. Again, just really, really angry at everything that had happened. And I was walking, on the sidewalk and passing a house a few doors down from mine. And there were some people out in the front yard having a snowball fight. Now, I'll say that these people were probably 17 years old. And in my recollection, there were four of them.
Mm-hmm.
So as I
You
had,
were how old again?
I was probably 25, give or take a year.
Okay.
So I passed them on the sidewalk as they're having a snowball fight. And as I pass and my back is to them, a snowball whizzes by my head. And I was pissed, but I just wanted to get home. And it kind of seemed like it would be a bad idea to cause a problem. So I decided to let it go. But as I took another step or two, another snowball whizzed by my head. And at that point, I just kind of snapped.
Mm-hmm.
I turned around and started walking toward this group of people. And I sensed which person had done it because he was now bent over, like, packing another snowball. So I walked right up to him and said something to the effect of, like, motherfucker.
He was selected based on the fact that he didn't get past puberty. This wasn't a selecting criteria.
So I walk up to him and, some words, what's your problem or whatever. So we kind of get into it, and I grab him by the coat and I go to throw him on the ground. And I hear a ripping sound. And at this point, it's been so long, I can't remember if I actually ripped the hood completely off of his coat, or if I just heard it really rip. But anyway, from there, he went down, and then I was in the snow, and I went down, and we were kind of wrestling. And at some point, I heard him say, "Get this motherfucker off of me." Like I say, there were 4 people total. And like when you hear that immediately in my mind, I was thinking, oh, somebody's going to like sucker punch me any moment. That's what immediately went through my brain. So I went to get myself up. And as I did, this guy was still on the ground. And I was able to get in like a kick as hard as I possibly could. And I did aim it for his face or his head, and something connected. And I did hear somebody, make a ooh, as if, that must have hurt. So from there, I just kind of, got up and got out of that situation before it got any worse.
But none of his friends kind of gang up on you, I guess?
No. I think I got out of there before that could happen. But that's what I was imagining happening. So I got out of there really, really quick. So I go down maybe 2 or 3 houses to my apartment. I go in and realize that during this scuffle, I'd lost my glasses. And this was well before I'd had my LASIK surgery. So I was probably legally blind without my glasses. So this was a big concern because I wouldn't have even been able to drive home to work or drive to work the next day without those glasses. And of course, I thought, well, if I go back down to their house and go, rummaging through the snow on my hands and knees because I can't see, they're going to come out and this time really kick my ass. So I ended up calling the cops. And explaining to the cops that I'd been in this scuffle down the street and that I'd lost my glasses and I really, really needed them. And I felt that if I went back down the street to get them, I'd probably be confronted again. And this time it probably wouldn't. I had a feeling it wouldn't turn out very well. So, yeah, the cops showed up, escorted me down. I found my glasses. And as I was out there looking for him, at least I think like 2 of those same guys came out to see what was going on. So the cop asked, hey, was there some kind of incident out here? And, they just played it off like, no, we don't know what you're talking about. And I didn't want to push it any further either. I just wanted to get my stuff and get on out of there. So that was my only physical fight as an adult.
Are you sure they were 17, or was it like 17 going on 12? Or
I'd like to say they were 17.
How certain of it?
Well, not completely certain.
Okay. All right. And I mean, did you tell the officer? They were throwing snowballs at me, and I had a difficult day. I was stressed out, and these snowballs were the last straw before my rage, before I had to assert my dormant alpha status, my male aggression.
It's been so long ago, I don't remember if I went into those details or not.
Did you just tell them that you were randomly attacked by a group of boys? Is that
No, I'm sure I mentioned, that I was walking. Yeah, I would have had to have laid it out that I was
Mhm.
walking home and there was, the snowballs and yeah, come to think of it, I'd have had to have laid all that out.
Right. Sir, how many snowballs did they throw at you exactly?
Well, I recall the two that whizzed by my head. I don't know. Some may have landed that I didn't see.
Have you reflected on the kind of not just the white snow, but perhaps the white privilege that made this whole thing happen?
Well, are you assuming that the victims of this were something other than white?
Naturally, I don't. But it's just calling the police to help you look for your glasses in a
Oh,
safe manner. A kind of a trust in a seamless trust in the institutions of oppressions, Mr. Robbins.
well, it did work out that way, though. In another incident in that same neighborhood, I felt I do have reason to believe that my white privilege did not serve me.
Well, this is a story I haven't heard. So since you hinted at it, let's hear it.
Okay, I was at the park one day with my dog, which was a very small terrier mix, a very harmless dog. But at the time, and I don't know how much this played into it. I had very long hair, and I was at the park and hadn't even bothered to take my wallet or any identification with me. It was like 2 blocks away, and I thought I'd let the dog go for, a little 15-minute run. So as I'm doing that, a cop comes over and says, "I need to see your identification." And I'm like, what's this about? And he says, "Well, your dog needs to be on a leash." And I'm like, "Oh, well, she's not hurting anybody." And there was another thing where, like, in that park, there's like a circle uh, drive around that is explicitly marked no parking. And I remember seeing people parked in there who weren't being hassled. But the
So
cop,
what is your theory? Is that you suspected that because you had a small dog, you were suspected of being homosexual and harassed as such?
no, I think that because I had long hair,
Uh,
he and I didn't have any identification. He asked me who I was and what my social security number was, and he went back to his car and ran all this, checking me for warrants. So I
hmm.
think he simply saw a guy out there who looked like, he might be someone that he could get for something because mostly my hair probably, and used the excuse of the dog not being on a leash. And as I was
Uh,
sitting there waiting, there was another couple, and they're like, this guy doesn't have anything better to do than harass you for your tiny dog not being on a leash.
why did you have such a small dog, Mr.
Uh, it's just, uh, it was given to me when I was younger.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And then I moved to the city, and the dog moved with me. So, yeah, in that case, I don't think my white privilege served me all that well.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like maybe you looked gay to him. Did you have a special kind of way of walking when you were walking your tiny dog?
No,
These
I
are
mean,
the kind of stereotypes that some cops have, that we don't approve it on the stream. But
no, that was probably more my grunge days. So I was probably looking a little more like someone who may have been at some point convicted of drugs or
hmm.
not paying some kind of ticket.
Hmm. This was back in the days when Mr. Robbins was cool, when he had hair and but wasn't so cool as to be dangerous in any way. Here's a
No,
man with a small dog. He's pulling that age right in the park.
yeah. So that's about the
Was
only
it
other run-in with the police in the city that I can remember.
was it painful, Mr. Robbins, for you when the dog died?
Yeah, it really was. It really was. I mean, that's one thing that I do remember the particulars of that day, the day
Mhm.
that it was going to happen. But I decided,
You were gonna put it down, or
yeah, to put it down because, the thing was she was getting really, really sick. well, really, really old, and I think it was more like arthritis than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where, I mean, she couldn't even walk like half a block without having to stop and just stand.
Yeah.
And I lived in a second floor apartment. So, I mean, I could carry her up, but I just didn't see her quality of life being worth maintaining, really, for her even.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like in that day that I remember putting her down in the hours leading up to that, just looking at her and wondering whether or not I was doing the right thing. It's like, is this really in that animal's best interest, or is this just making things easier for me?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. And have you did this prevent you from getting another dog, or
I've never had another dog or a cat. Um,
because of this experience or no?
um, I would say no. But people ask me that all the time because they probably see that I'm a middle-aged, single, lonely man. So one of the first things is always either get a girlfriend or get a dog. I tell myself that I just don't want the responsibility of it because they do require a lot of responsibility if you're going to be a decent pet owner. And I just don't have the inclination to put in that much effort right now.
Yeah. Well, cats I think are relatively easy. I never had a dog in my life as a pet, so they're kind of foreign to me. But I do really hate it when people walk in parks without their dog on a leash, especially like a large dog. I do have a fear of dogs going back to childhood, and it's just kind of annoying when you're trying to walk around in the park and just kind of have some sort of moment or whatever of reflection, and then there's like some dog running out because its owner trusts in its intrinsic friendliness. But um, I'm not sure about these dogs, Mr. Robbins. Well, I do have an incident to report to you. It's kind of like the snowball incident, but way less. I don't know, no physical violence either, but just a kind of a confrontation with the locals, a sort of a, a strange situation I had, Mr. Robbins, and I really kind of wanted your opinion on this. All right.
Okay.
All right. So I was working and I was pulling into this closed clinic to take their samples that they left for me out of the box, out of the metal box, whatever. So as I'm pulling in, this is in a small town of Bethel, and as I'm pulling in there are some girls crossing the street, and I stop for them, and they cross over and they go toward that clinic, and then they literally go and sit on like a bench for the medical personnel that's literally next to my car as I'm skillfully parking backwards into that kind of a little alley space. And so I really parked like right next to them. And as they're sitting on the bench, like they didn't have to go there, they could go anywhere. And so I get out of this vehicle and I look at them and I say hi. Can you imagine their response, Mr. Robbins?
Normal response would be to say hi in return.
Yes, but their actual response, there were like four of them or three. Their actual response was total silence and just staring at me. I mean, we're literally next to each other. So then there was that awkward moment where I locked the car, even though I'm like walking like 2 feet into the kind of, where the car is visible. I just kind of locked the car right with them sitting next to it. And as I'm like coming back with the metal box because I put it in my trunk in my car, as I like take out the samples and I return the metal box to the ground, one of them was like, "Boo, boo, 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 boo," And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she again just stares at me without without any sort of I don't know. I mean, she said something, and I'm not sure if it was to me, but she looked at me like with some frustration, as if like I should have understood what she said before. And the thing about it, like I'm very awkward in real life, even with children. So I probably like sounded like Michael Jackson all the time. I was like, "Oh, what did you say?" Anyway, hey girls. Anyway, so right, and I put the box back to the building, and I just kind of drive out of there, and I nod to them, and they just like stare at me with hostility. Now, Mr. Robbins, this is like a small town, and these are your people, Mr. Robbins. This is the kind of a small town white trash that I associate you with. So maybe you can interpret this behavior for me.
Well, that was going to be my question. Well, two questions. How old were they? And based on appearance, did you make a judgment about social class?
I mean, they would be in their, I mean, they would be in their like early teens, I guess. I don't really kind of, it's hard for me to say nowadays, but seems like they would have been around 11 or something, like within a few years.
Okay.
Kind of, yeah.
No, that kind of makes sense. And I think I've even run into it out here at least once. It's like you get young kids in groups and they want to act stupid or obnoxious in ways that they wouldn't do by themselves. They feel a sense of I don't know, I guess empowerment in a way of when they're within a group of other kids to just act in ways that they probably know they shouldn't. So in all likelihood, that's all kind of probably what was going on.
Well, this is the kind of there was just a seamlessness to it. Like they weren't even. It was like completely normal when I said hi. Well, I didn't say hi, girls, obviously, but I was like hey, and it just kind of looked at me like all of them. Like there didn't seem to be any conspiracy or any. This is what goes on in these small towns, like for fucking children of the corn type shit. Like nobody, like it was just weird to have like, and they were looking at me, and they specifically went to that bench like right next to where I was gonna park. So we were literally within like 2 feet of like a foot of one another. I opened the door, and they were right there. It was just kind of weird to be observed in this manner, not interacted with. And then they called me the N-word, Mr. Robbins, as I was pulling out. That was kind of weird. Why did they do that?
Well, that I can't explain.
Yeah, it's just.
I guess that was my point about, based on appearance, could you make any judgment on social class?
Because I mean, have you been to these small towns? I mean, it's all kind of one social class. They're like poor to lower middle class. I mean, that's where they fit in.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up there, but you do get more, I would say on the whole more middle to lower middle class, but you do get groups of kids who are more like the athletes and good students and that kind of thing, and you do get other groups of kids who are more troublesome. Mm-hmm. So I was just thinking that if you could make the generalization that they were probably of kind of a lower social class, that maybe they just didn't have, I don't know, the manners, I guess, that some other kids do.
There was something. There was something there. There was something there that's hard to kind of pinpoint.
Do you think it was a judgment of you in particular, or could have nearly?
I mean, maybe they were annoyed with how I mean, I did let them pass. I mean, maybe if only they were annoyed by that. But it's kind of weird to pursue me. I did let them pass, Mr. Robbins. I would not drive recklessly on the streets of Bethel. I mean, I do drive Like the one thing, if anybody is watching us from out of the country, the one bizarre thing about America is like in most countries you have like a unified police agency throughout the country, whereas in America that's not the case. And this kind of explains some of the shootings that happen, you know, with minorities and others, because like these police departments, they're everywhere. There are tons of them, and they really are of vastly different qualities. You have the sheriff, you have the local police, you know, whatever. And here in these small towns, they have tiny police forces, and most of what they do is fucking give tickets to people who are passing through this shitty small town. And that's why, like, whenever I'm in these small towns, I drive very carefully and follow the speed limit, because that's all they fucking do. Like, you don't have that, Mr. Robbins, in like most countries where there's a tiny local police departments and all it fucking has like 3 people on staff, and all it does is give tickets. It's just a weird aspect of American local government. So I was careful driving there, and I definitely gave these girls time to move.
We've got some good comments here. If you
Go ahead.
Manhole says they were awed by your reverse parking skills, Papa.
Yeah.
And Carter Swinton says maybe they were proletarian scum.
Yeah, maybe. Frankly, maybe. I mean,
I was trying to put it much more politically correct.
I wasn't hurt by this. I'm hurt by the nurses who sometimes like question me, or a lot of our drivers, Mr. Robbins, are hurt by the nurses and like the different ladies, administrators there who hurt their feelings on the regular. Especially this one lady at the one hospital. A lot of men have complained about her hurting their feelings. She hasn't been too vicious with me, but it is these little girls can't do anything. They can't pierce me like some fucking lab assistant can, Mr. Robbins.
I see. Establishing hierarchy within the lab.
Yeah, these girls mean nothing to me. Anyway, let's see. I have a piece of music here to share. You want a little more?
No, I think I'm okay.
Yeah.
What do we got going on there? It sounds like something from a Nintendo game.
Well, this is from the Game of the Republic, from the game, a dangerous game of politics, Mr. Robbins. This is the song of the Mueller report.
Oh, great.
Yeah, this is some fucking nerd did the automatic, like, made an automatic composition using the Mueller report. That is to say, the computer generates different types of sounds and relative to redacted versions, right? So what you saw there is different beats for redacted and unredacted pages, and pages that are partly redacted, and so on. So this is what we're hearing here with this. Some shit has been redacted, Mr. Ramos. What are they hiding from us here?
Gotcha. The song of the Mueller report.
Yeah, this is the. Anyway, and this is the perfect song to sort of illustrate. I think that remember when, what was that song that the Democrats did in the 90s, Macarena, for some reason?
Oh, maybe. Wow.
Yeah, they did. Like, there is a video you could Google of Al Gore doing the Macarena, whatever. Oh, for some reason they did this in the 90s a lot, the Democrats. And it's just kind of, I think it's kind of corny and cool. But this is going to be the new Macarena for the Democratic Party, this fucking Mueller report. Because motherfucking, that's Saint Mueller. This kind of square-jawed wasp fucking descended from heavens to restore restore justice. He was going to deliver a spanking to Donald Trump, but it's us, Mr. Robbins, who ended up with a sore booty, because it doesn't seem like anything fucking happened. We want the full report now. We want to fucking pull these pubes. You hang on to the pube, Mr. Robbins. I will hang on to another pube of this report. And Rachel Maddow is going to also kind of pull on the pube. And we're all going to fucking pull on that shit until we see the full fucking thing there. And then we're going to be fucking validated with this report. Everybody has fucking moved on and is just kind of stuffing their face with processed foods right now. We're fucking pulling on that fucking report. What has fucking Mueller left out there? This is fucking the Kabbalah. This is this Mueller report. There's certain things, if you read it backwards, and if you know the sacred language, if you translate it into Hebrew and then Aramaic, then there's going to be that fucking connection.
Yeah.
The essence of things. And this is what this Mueller song is just the beginning of our repertoire of getting really deep into the report. We, of course, need to see the blacked out parts. But even with these parts blacked out, there's still a lot of things we can, project onto them. Our longing, our needs, our desires, our complete political incompetencies of fucking formulating political messages that fucking resonate with anybody else. This is what we can project on the fucking Mueller report. There's so much there. There's so much there, man.
Well, I can see that you had high, high hopes for this being the smoking gun that would put the final nails in the coffin of Trump. But yeah, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Like, I personally had no hopes whatsoever. And you have to really, like, it's just sort of the amount of energy that has been invested in this thing. Like, let me be clear. I think that Trump realistically has obstructed justice, and if things were fair in the world, he would be impeached. I mean, the thing about it is like the Constitution is flawed because as it functions hypothetically on a kind of a high level, on a celestial level, there would be a group of independent gentlemen in the Congress, and then they would judiciously make a call to get somebody impeached. And this was the check and balance. This was the check on the presidency. So of course, Congress is divided and dysfunctional and dominated by political parties, which the founding fathers didn't want. So effectively, Nixon would never be impeached today, and especially with the Republican Congress. So impeachment basically becomes a near impossibility, and then we're left with the idea of the executive branch investigating itself, and then you have a question of like, well, he has the right to fire anybody there, and it's his branch ultimately. Like, he has the right, but that paradoxically, I mean, that puts him above the law. Like, it's the Congress who should do it. So it's just it's a catch-22. There should be, like, there was the special prosecutor that the Congress has created, and that was criticized as a fourth branch of government. But in fact, there should be like a fourth branch of government for this shit, because I mean, the way it is basically like, pretty fucking dysfunctional. And yeah, I mean, he did try to fire a person who was investigating him multiple times, and it's only because his acolytes were smart enough and cautious enough not to do it, and that's fine. But anyway, however, aside from that, it's like I said before, there's just this kind of a, Fox News runs on a narrative. Like, they have a narrative of the enemy, the communists destroying America, trying to take away your guns, kind of stupid libs, whatever. They have a running narrative. And finally, after this Russian interference in the election, Democrats had their narrative as well. Like, they had the enemy Putin and Trump. and they kind of ran with this narrative and really became freaking consumed with it to the detriment of any reality. Now, Mr. Robbins, we do have a few comments from the New York Times that are indicative of this. Are you ready to read us the first one?
Yes. So Mary O said, so Bill Clinton lied about a tawdry affair and was brought up for impeachment. Trump lies about matters of national security, accepting help from a foreign government to influence a campaign, while his band of assorted grifters work to open back channels with the Russians, ... And nothing, ? Interesting times we're living in.
Yes. So here, there is no actual proof, right? That's what the Mueller report stated, that he colluded with the Russians. So we're kind of, again, living in that Russians interfered in the election, and then Trump encouraged that interference publicly. But again, in all likelihood, both Trump and Russians both were united in their opinion that he's going to lose. And Trump was scheming to get his Moscow tower, and the Russians hated Hillary and wanted to kick her, in the shins before she would get elected. So, Mr. Robbins, continue with the second one.
Cyrano commented, I can't believe how much time they wasted on garbage when there's so much more important stuff going on. So I guess this was someone else's quote, to which Cyrano replied, an attack on our country by a hostile foreign power with the cooperation of your president is not important. Note, by the way, that Trump has done nothing to stop it, but the unbrainwashed portion of the public will in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one kind of speaks for itself. And the last one, Mr. Robbins.
Socrates, spelled incorrectly. Regardless of historical Trumpian shenanigans and Trump's spectacular ongoing unfitness for office, the real legacy of modern republicanism is that they remain perfectly comfortable with the 2016 Russian invasion. The GOP's comfort level with stealing elections by any means necessary so they can hijack public policy and the judiciary while rejecting its citizens' needs in favor of grand 1% policy is the real story. Trump's illicit ascent was also made possible by widespread voter suppression laws in Republistan, not just with blatant Kremlin support and Jim Comey's bumbling Boy Scout blunder of a lifetime. Trump's Republican hijacked America is now largely identical to crooked Russian oligarchy, featuring record income inequality, sham elections, a gilded class with zero interest in the peasant class, and a domestic propaganda industrial complex as good as the Kremlin disinformation factory. Trump is ultimately a distraction from the real Russian import, corrupt oligarchy, as far as Mitch McConnell and his GOP cultists can see.
Mm-hmm.
Trump is essentially the Boris Yeltsin of America, sans the drunkenness, a ringleader of craven oligarchs who all want to make feudalism great again. Decent Americans need to revolt in record numbers against Russian Republicans in 2020. Any American who goes along with this right-wing Republican political syndicate has little interest in America, its people, its values, or its flag. Reject the United States of Russia.
Oh, yeah. Right. And it's just kind of describing 2/3 of white people there who did vote for Trump. Mr. Robbins, United States of Russia, what are your thoughts about this?
I mean, from what I've read, there was, perhaps some form of like wink and a nod collusion going on with Trump and the Russians, that it was necessarily there to get Russia in. Like, versus just punishing Hillary, I'm not so sure. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is, I don't have any reason to think that the investigation wasn't performed, correct.
Sounds like you don't give a shit, Mr. Robbins. That's what I'm hearing, basically.
Well, what my sense is that what Mueller was saying is that Trump is neither being exonerated nor am I saying that he's guilty. What I'm saying is that there's not enough information here to make that decision. Now,
No, I mean, there are two aspects here. When it comes to the idea that Trump and Russia, the Kremlin, worked together, they didn't find any evidence of it. That is to say that anybody in the Trump campaign told, like, Russia, could you hack Hillary or something along those lines. That's how I understood it. That there was no evidence of that type of a collusion.
right.
There was a question of later on whether he obstructed justice, and that's the one that they didn't render a judgment on. But they didn't find any evidence of direct collusion. If you think about, like, the people he would be colluding through, it would be like Manafort, who had connections, I mean, with Ukraine, with pro-Russian forces in Ukraine, and so on. But anyway, I mean, I think my kind of overall point is that it is a very powerful and a sexy narrative, this whole story. It's kind of like there is treason, Russians elected Trump worked with them, we're going to unravel this baby, and Trump is going to collapse. And none of this fucking happened. Trump was an asshole and tried to obstruct justice, but none of those things happened. And instead of sort of engaging with politics, which would lead you to recognize the fact that some, like the state like we're living in, Ohio, that, like I said 100 times before, voted for Obama 2 times and then flipped to Trump, that this had nothing to do with anything the Russians did. The boomer memes or releasing fucking boring Democratic emails that produced nothing aside from the Pizzagate conspiracy. I'm not saying that this is not a serious breach in interfering in American affairs. Of course it is. It's just that just because something happened doesn't mean that it determined the whole election. Just because Trump is an asshole and encouraged Russia publicly to hack into Hillary's emails doesn't indicate that this was the reason why he won. And the one thing that's going to be missing from all these comments on New York Times is any kind of a reflection about real sort of politics, as far as like, why did Hillary lose? Well, it's fucking Russia, of course. And Hillary will also kind of deflect any responsibility. She'd be like, oh, well, I was the nominee, I take responsibility, but he had some help. That's what she always fucking says. And so there is no kind of a political narrative to reclaim the lost ground. There's just a kind of this romantic narrative, if you like, or a spy thriller narrative, where there's going to be this fucking Robert Mueller is going to fucking restore things, and everybody's a fucking traitor who votes for Trump, and which is, again, the vast majority of white people, if you want to put it this way. And nobody else fucking gives that much shit about this Mueller probe. I mean, they might want to see the whole thing or whatever, but people have completely integrated that. That is to say, if Trump has already encouraged Russia publicly during the election to hack into Hillary Clinton and reveal more information, and people have integrated that into their system and still voted for him, what the fuck is this fucking Mueller report gonna do now? Well, it's just it's just kind of a moot point. I mean, I think that if you really want to go after sort of politics, I think you have to follow that old kind of Karl Rove dictum of attacking your opponent's strength. So, I mean, they did it dirty with John Kerry. I mean, his whole thing was he was a veteran. Bush served in the National Guard. It was a privileged kind of cush service that Bush enjoyed. Kerry was a Vietnam War veteran, and then you had like the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth that started shitting on him, a Republican campaign to undermine his strength, which was his service. And then you had Obama versus Mitt Romney, where Mitt Romney's kind of appeal was that he's a businessman. Um, Obama's like a community organizer. Mitt Romney is, well, he kind of doing like the Trump thing with the business people, like businessman. And then Obama campaign very effectively attacked him as a kind of a hedge fund, whatever, as just a greedy fucking asshole who fired people effectively. And then with Trump, like, what are they going after? It's like, well, he's a racist. Well, unfortunately, people just don't give a shit. I mean, people who do, but it's like, he's bad to Muslims or illegal immigrants. People should give a shit, but they don't, as far as like shifting those people in the middle who voted for Obama before. And I think where you have to go after him is his business record, which of course the Democrats have gone after him, but it is his major asset. And they need to go after it more. Just have an ad like, fucking Donald Trump Sr. gave him money here and there. He's just daddy's rich boy or whatever. Trump's going to respond to it on Twitter, and it's going to be a big theme about his bankruptcies and so on. And also about him kind of the idea of Trump of being the straight talker, somebody who kind of is full of shit sometimes, but he's not an average politician, and then just kind of highlight the policies of his that actually benefit the rich, show the contradictions between his kind of hedonism with a woman and his now pretending to be a Christian. I mean, not that everybody's going to give a shit about this, but something along those lines is better than this kind of continuing with this fucking Russian probe narrative. Mr. Robbins, any final thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I mean, the thing I keep coming to is like a sports narrative, and like losing the Super Bowl, but the losing team, blaming it all on the other team. It's like I see a lot of that going on since the Democrats lost to Trump. Instead of looking at themselves and trying to understand what did we do wrong, so that should we make it to the Super Bowl again, maybe we'll win. That they keep hoping that, like you say, that it's going to be some kind of like judicial solution to this, that Trump's going to be either impeached or brought up on some kind of criminal charge. That's how we win, instead of focusing on what you did wrong politically.
Yeah, it's a stupid approach to it. Well, of course, we can't leave the political scene behind before we talk about creepy Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden, of course, likes to get close with the ladies. Mr. Robbins, what were your thoughts about it? Would you like to be snuggled by Joe Biden? Have you ever found yourself smelling ladies' hair, or maybe whispering things in their ear, who you were not intimately connected with?
No, I'm not at all a touchy-feely kind of guy. So yeah, I think I, in some ways, could maybe sympathize with those ladies. Stay away, Joe.
Yeah. Do you think this should disqualify him from the presidency?
Something I was interested to know. It's like, is this something he exclusively does with women, or there are guys who are very hey, come here and give me a hug, buddy. It's a little more creepy if he does it exclusively to women.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I would be curious to know if he's that way just generally.
I mean, I have kind of conflicting feelings about it, because I think it's good to talk about like personal boundaries and so on. On the other hand, it's always like you think about like I think there's like 1 million Rohingya refugees that Buddhist Burma kicked out into Bangladesh through horrible rape and murder. And now like Bangladesh wants to build a huge island for them and put them on this island. I mean, it's just sort of insane levels of suffering. But on the other hand, it's kind of important to talk about this stuff as well. I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of a strange thing because I can't imagine doing something like this without like some sexual undercurrents. But I guess for some people, that's what they want to do is just to snuggle. I mean, you can like kind of snuggling with women without it being sexual. It seems like he did it with ladies of all ages and so on, and he just has a kind of a comfort with them. But in order to do something like that, you kind of assume that you're just kind of this Uncle Joe, right? It's kind of like if I always have this strange thought that I would like um slap some dude on the ass as a joke and say, "Hey, bro," like kind of a locker room thing, but do it to some old man at work. It is just a stupid. I mean, I'm never gonna do anything like that, obviously, but it's just a stupid kind of invasive thought that I have because you make like that little stupid small talk, and you're like, "Hey, Joe." Anyway.
I guess part of the reason that I brought that up, wondering if he's that way just with women or with people in general is, and I think I brought this up before. I actually work with a woman who is very, very much like that. And she's very much that way with everyone, men and women alike. And even to the people that she knows that it sort of makes them uncomfortable. And I don't think that she does it to really put them in a position of feeling uncomfortable. It's just, I don't know, in a way, her way of saying, it's okay.
Mr. Robbins, how do you experience first-hand experience?
Pardon me?
How do you experience that?
Yeah, I experience it every week.
Well, how?
Oh, well, we walk in, me and another guy in particular, because she knows that we're kind of weird when it comes to that touchy-feely stuff. So we come in and she either, puts her hands on our shoulders and gives us a quick little shoulder rub. Hey guys, how you doing? Or literally gives us hugs, knowing that it makes us feel kind of weird. But I know that it's not done maliciously. She's just kind of playing with us,
Yeah.
So even though it's weird, I don't necessarily hold it against her. But at the same time, I will recognize that it's different, but between a woman doing that to a man and a guy like Joe doing that to women who don't want it.
Well, yeah. Well, where I was going for before with like the towel snaps and like slapping somebody on the ass like a bro, it assumes that you're kind of like this Uncle Joe. There's an assumption that it's Uncle Joe, right? Because if it was a stranger or a casual acquaintance. And so it seems like Joe Biden views himself as a kind of a Santa Claus or something who can like pull you on their lap and it's not going to be weird. And he just kind of he just views himself as Uncle Joe, and that's it. I mean, it's very weird for me to like the things he does. I mean, they look sexual, but I don't think they're sexual for him. He just likes kind of touching women in that way, but it seems like, but whatever. Of course, it is ironic that the one person we never talk about in these discussions is Bill Clinton, who actually pretty credibly raped people. It's just kind of as liberals and Democrats, it's just kind of what we just kind of don't talk about. It's the weirdest talk about fucking a Russian conspiracy there.
Yeah,
it's just
we all have our blind spots.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward to talk about that multiple women have credibly accused him of rape, so we just don't. It's like the whole Me Too thing passes by, Joe Biden, and it's so good in the hood. Like Hillary running for president was the best thing that happened to Bill Clinton. And even if she won, there could have been way more scrutiny on this past. But as she like ran and lost and became like a feminist leader, now Bill became kind of untouchable, which is works for you if you potentially are a rapist. I mean, we don't know for sure. And of course, we have to hear touch about the dullest clown car in the world. And I'm of course talking about the Democratic race for president. And recently there was, have you suddenly started hearing about Mayor Pete?
No, I've not heard.
You haven't heard about Mayor Pete?
No.
I can't even pronounce that word. Mayor. mayor. Anyway, yeah, he South Bend, Indiana. Are you familiar with that town?
Oh gosh, I should be from Indiana, but I think it's up north.
I don't know.
I can't
Well,
remember.
anyway, fucking Mayor Pete. Like all of a sudden, I hear this fucking Mayor Pete everywhere, and that's how he's introduced to the kind of national stage. It's fucking Mayor Pete, and I'm like reading like, why are we referring to this? Um, why are we referring to this man with this kind of a moniker, Mayor Pete? I mean, he does have a last name that's difficult to pronounce, Buttigieg or something, but still, it's like, oh, it's fucking Mayor Pete. And I'm like reading about like him in the New York Times, and that's how he's referred to in the columns, like Mayor Pete. And
It seems like, yeah, it seems like this is sounding a little familiar, but not just recently. Has he been around for a while?
No, I mean, well, he's been around for a while. I mean, he's only recently entered the national scene, but it's just like, are we in like fucking like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood? Here comes fucking Mayor Pete with a little lady all or whatever. It's just fucking weird. And the thing about Mayor Pete is that he's basically like a hyper-educated yuppie, and he went to Oxford and so on, and Yale, like stuff like that. I mean, he's really educated, and he served in the military. And then it's like the story about Mayor Pete is that he could have had this yuppie lifestyle, but instead, like he went to Indiana, back to his hometown, and became a mayor there. Like that's the kind of a guy he is. Like he kind of he rejected the Whole Foods lifestyle for the Heartland lifestyle. But the motherfucking truth about this Mayor Pete is that he always fucking tried to get out of Indiana as soon as he got back. Like for him, going back to Indiana is like going to like a poor country during college to volunteer, you know, and just to get the fuck out of there and like talk about it for the rest of your life. That's why he went back. And it's like the thing is, because I'm mentally ill, I can understand the perspective of somebody who wants to get into national politics, because I had these grandiose fantasies and like in a parallel universe. Like you basically, if you're like start thinking about like going for public office at a young age, you start to format your whole adulthood around it. It's kind of like being an athlete or something. I mean, of course, none of this have fucking happened in my life, but these thoughts have existed, and I believe that they closely parallel what people who actually go into politics have. And so, yeah, I think he had a plan. He's like, well, I'm going to go to the military. I'm going to go to schools, but I can't just then like move to New York from Indiana. I have to go back to Indiana, establish my political career there. And then there's a kind of talk about fucking, it's my medication alarm. And then I'm going to, you know, proceed from there. And it's in as part of this, there's just this Mayor Pete persona. He already tried to leave fucking Indiana when he tried to run for DNC, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and now he's running for president. Fuck it. And you know, the whole thing is bullshit. But so yeah, it sounds like, Mr. Robbins, you don't fucking follow this thing at all.
It's sounding vaguely familiar. This little mayor from South Bend, Indiana. Who is this guy? Somewhere along the line, I think I've come across this, but it's very vague.
Yeah, it's basically like he's also kind of he also has a kind of a straight white man appeal, like a heartland appeal, which seems to still resonate with Democrats in spite of everything. But he's also gay, so he's like a gay Christian, and they're like, well, he's gonna challenge the Christians on their own turf by showing his gay family values. And that's on the one hand, that's completely fine, but it's also, and I don't mean to like sound like a new atheist, but I will. It's kind of like a little bit of a bullshit thing. Like imagine, Mr. Robbins, if I had memoirs, and on like page 20 of these memoirs, I said, you know, all fags should be stoned. And then you would be like a follower of mine later on, and you'd say, oh, it doesn't really matter, fucking page 20. He was speaking metaphorically. Like, it's a pretty homophobic I mean, it's the definition of homophobia. If the prescription for somebody who's gay is for them to literally be killed. And I know that they say, oh, it's never been enforced or whatever. I mean, it still is pretty fucked up. So it's just kind of the idea of like a gay Christian is somewhat goofy to me. I mean, maybe you need to kind of make it more new age or whatever. What are your thoughts on that, gay Christians?
Man, at this point, I'm not so sure. Any sort of like consistency matters that much. It's about getting people excited. I mean, this guy, as you're saying that,
Well, no, consistency definitely never matters. But does it matter to you, or do you get like, do you have any reflections on this?
I'm becoming so cynical now that I'm starting to believe that I guess it would be pragmatism. You've just got to do what works. And I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm not gonna like. I'd vote for whatever Democrat like who makes it. But I mean, I'm talking about like on an individual level. Like if you met a gay man, he said, "I'm a gay Christian." What would you think about it? Would you see the absurdity of it?
I would have a hard time making sense of it. And yeah, I imagine that if we sat down and tried to talk through it, I would imagine that somewhere along the line, you would come to the point where he would have to admit that he's having a hard time making sense of it too.
I want Mayor Pete to be a Gnostic Christian, the Gnostic, where there is an evil God who created a universe and like a good God who created like the spirit. I want him to be the first Gnostic gay Christian to be elected president. But I don't have anything particularly against Mayor Pete. I just don't like these kind of like cute monikers. I just think that it's like, I do think that he's just a scheming politician who, it's like, which I don't have a problem with it. I just don't want to call him Mayor Pete. That's basically, that's what pisses me off. It's like Obama, right? Obama grew up with white people in Hawaii. And then naturally he went to Chicago, like a core kind of a black city with a large black middle class, with a kind of a, it makes perfect sense, and became, it's kind of like they make fun of him for being a community organized. But motherfucker, he was pretty detached from community. Like his father was African, his mother was white. He was raised by his white grandparents in Hawaii, where there aren't a lot of black people. He needed to be fucking community organizer to connect with the community. Basically, he wasn't around like too many black people, and like when he went to college, he would be around like more middle class, upper middle class black people, and so kind of went in there really to merge himself in kind of mainstream black culture and kind of Midwestern kind of mainstream America in a sense. Like, I mean, Hawaii, I'm not saying Hawaii isn't real America like Cokie Roberts did or whatever, but it is a kind of an unusual state. So yeah, and it's like all these idiots like Sarah Palin like make fun of him as if this like dude who fucking went to, I forget, Harvard, couldn't do anything else but be a community organizer, as if like, he couldn't be a fucking corporate lawyer, which he definitely could have. And then it's like, Obama gets there, and then one of his like, he becomes a professor at Chicago University, and then one of his colleagues like watches Obama like run for like state senate and just shake hands and be this politician, and he's like, why the fuck is he doing it? Because the whole thing is a fucking plan. Their whole life is built around this one goal. And the same with fucking Mayor Pete. But with Obama, we didn't have a cute moniker that he could be referred to. And man, do I miss Obama. Like, that's the one thing I have in common with these commentators. Like, I'm not that on the left to really feel disappointed by Obama. And man, like whenever I see Obama talk, it's kind of course, a little more boring than our current president. But man, do I miss him. Any nostalgia for Obama, Mr. Robbins?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any favorites in the race right now?
No, I took a look today and was trying to get a little bit of a handle for what's going on. The New York Times has a list of people who are running or likely to run, and those who won't. I know we had brought up Sherrod Brown. They're listing him as not running.
Yeah.
As likely to run would be good old Uncle Joe, which I can't get on board with that. A couple of the people I'm looking at and would be interested to learn more is this guy, last name Yang. I think he was on Rogan's podcast recently and advocating the, what is it, universal basic income. He's a guy, kind of a dark horse candidate, sort of maybe an outsider type candidate I'd be interested in learning more about. And then I came across this guy here, John Delaney. Don't really know much about him other than he describes himself as a pragmatic idealist and seems sort of kind of a centrist. Has pitched himself as a bipartisan problem solver, but has also endorsed liberal causes like universal health care. So that's some kind of person I think I'd be somewhat interested in. How about you?
Well, in my case, I really like Bernie is to the left of me. I'm kind of moderate on economic issues in a sense. I mean, I'm basically like a New Deal type Democrat, which in a sense is what Bernie is ultimately. But yeah, I mean, I kind of could be a Bernie bro. I'm not a particularly like enthusiastic one, but at this point, it's just like, I don't know, I don't give a shit. I'm just sort of annoyed with these like New York Times commentators and like the whole kind of, I just want this kind of Democratic establishment flushed, much of it. And like Bernie is, that's kind of because he gets under their skin. That's mostly, even though in some ways I'm ideologically closer to them, but I just culturally, they're so fucking annoying that Bernie satisfies me in that sense. But I like Tulsi Gabbard. Well, nobody's watching this stupid stream now. This kind of what Trump would call a low energy stream. I will say that I find Tulsi to be incredibly attractive, and not just in a kind of a hubba hubba objectification way, but she's just a very like strong, beautiful woman who's very confident and like articulate. And I do find her incredibly attractive. Like, I really, really do, Mr. Robbins.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to say, but you'll probably be deluged by photos of her filmed in unflattering light, because I've seen some. I've had some of the very same sentiments as you, and have probably gone down the hole of YouTube searches.
Seems like you have creeped out, Mr. Robbins. As a father, as a YouTube father, I will not. I will not kind of answer these types of questions as to whether I did searches or not. But no, I like her. I just like her whole thing, and it's like, she did meet with the serial killer Assad, but who's without flaws. And she seems to get a good reception from Jimmy Dore, who of course is a big authority for me, Mr. Robbins, as we know. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just have a certain nihilism, and I look for people like Bernie, or it would be really cool. I mean, she is a Hindu, which actually could interfere with actual electability, but I'm just so tired of these establishment Democrats aside from Obama. And I don't hate Joe Biden, but he should definitely not run. Like, Joe Biden has lived a life of suffering in many ways. Maybe this is why he's smelling hair. He's looking for kind of what he lost in through these creepy activities and the rubbing. Because his first wife and like their child died in a car crash, and then his son died from a brain tumor. So I mean, he really had a ton of suffering in his life, Joe Biden did. And I do respect that in a sense. And like Stephen Colbert is another one. Did you know that Stephen Colbert is like almost his dad, and he had a big Catholic family, and his dad and a bunch of his brothers have died in a plane crash?
No, no idea.
Yeah, so yeah, I just kind of remember that about these guys, and they have my sympathy for those reasons. But yeah, I would never vote for Joe Biden, even though I kind of like him as a old school Pole. But um, I don't know, even like fucking Al Gore. And recently, I've I was actually recently, like when that Boeing fell, they had an interview with Ralph Nader, and man, was fucking Ralph on point there. I mean, he really had he was so fucking articulate and smart in talking about this disaster. I was like, man, I really can understand why people could support him before. Like, if he just sounded like that all the time, I mean, he sounds awesome. But anyway, well, fuck it. Let's move on from this shit. Um, all right. All right, Mr. Robbins, why don't you read a Q&A, the first question from Patreon Q&A that I'm going to answer now.
Okay. As long as they don't give their real name, I'll give their
No,
name.
you can Yina.
Yina asks, a PMI on American exceptionalism, please. Positive, minus, and interesting.
Well, American exceptionalism is the form of tribalism, and tribalism, as we know, is the deadliest, most dehumanizing thing ever in one way or another. It does sets you apart. It is a form of insanity, and it's also like exists in Russia as well. Russian exceptionalism, even though Russians don't use that term de facto, it is what it is. And but it does give a country a certain kind of spunk and energy. Like they're kind of like countries like that, like Russia, America, China, India, any kind of a hyper nationalist countries, they do have a certain spunk, and it does give them a certain energy. But ultimately, the world would be better without them. But it would, I mean, it's a challenge to have a healthy tribalism because it seems unavoidable. But overall, I mean, overall, it's bad. And American exceptionalism is something that gives a lot of power and momentum and spunk, but also contributes to something like the Vietnam War, where like 3 million people died. Mr. Robbins, your thoughts?
Something that came up between us the other day, talking about, living in America and recognizing that in a sense you are a part of the big show. And before we kind of had that conversation, I'd always kind of poo-pooed the notion of patriotism or exceptionalism, that kind of thing. But in having that conversation, I did realize that there is at least some spark of pride within me for being a part of this, of living in this country that sort of is the big time,
Yeah. Well, that's a subjective experience, Mr. Robbins. We're going deeper than that. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's like when you move from Russia to America, you move from one like hyper country to another. Whereas like moving to like from Russia to Canada, let's say, something would be lost for me. Um, but whatever, some people are fine in living in countries that are a footnote in history. No, I'm just kidding. Canada is, of course, very important. Mr. Robbins, let's not slander our neighbors up north and continue with the Thucydides questions.
Okay. Do you play any musical instrument? If not, would you like to learn how to play one, and which one? I hear Megan Fox really likes the melodica.
Yes, so of course the instrument, Mr. Robbins, that I play is Thucydides' mom. No, I will say that no, I don't. I can't carry a tune, and I'm not really musically inclined at all. I mean, there are people who never listen to music, and I'm not one of them. I listen to a lot of music, but in a sense, my whole music is always like a background to my mania, aside from Leonard Cohen, which was a background to my depression. So it was just kind of a background. Well, Leonard Cohen was more, and well, anyway, well, fuck it. You know what I'm saying. Mr. Robbins, do you play an instrument?
No, I've tried several times from the time I was a kid. My parents forced me into piano, and I just have no aptitude for it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no none whatsoever that's been detected, but also like none of my parents play any instruments or no sports or music in my family. Um, all right, so let's continue with this. His second question.
Do you know any other conspiracy theory surrounding Putin or the powers that be in today's Russia, in addition to those that you've already mentioned?
Okay, well, the conspiracy theory is that Putin has a double. He has like a kind of a what's that German expression?
Doppelganger?
Yeah, that basically he has a double that sometimes does certain things for him, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it's conceivable. But I mean, the biggest conspiracy theory about Putin, and that's the one I already mentioned before, is that there were explosions of apartment buildings that were blamed on the Chechens when Putin was prime minister under Yeltsin and the designated successor. And they were blamed on the Chechens, and as a result of it, Putin started the Second Chechen War, and he reclaimed Chechnya for Russia. And this is where he presented himself as being strong, and his rating, kind of like Bush after 9/11, went up from 5% to whatever 50 over 50. I mean, it skyrocketed from there, and he was the first kind of strong politician taking action against terrorism, protecting the country, and reclaiming Chechnya for the Russian Federation. And there are conspiracies that it was the FSB, and it. I encourage you to look it up if you're interested in apartment bombing, Russia conspiracy. Google something like that, and it will come up. There were in one city, police detained two people who were suspected of planting explosives. And Mr. Robbins, they turned out to be FSB agents, agents of the Russian KGB successor. Now they said that they were carrying out a test. The whole thing is very shady and unfortunately plausible. And I mean, it's a kind of a horrific thing because like around 300 people died, I think. So yeah, that's the biggest theory concerning Putin. Mr. Robbins, continue with the next one.
Should ASMR be added as a diagnostic criterion to the DSM-6, or should it be considered a distinct disorder in and of itself?
Well, ASMR is kind of an interesting thing, but it's kind of like it helps me sometimes when I'm kind of depressed and I just want to knock out from life and just kind of get lost in a sense from my thoughts to watch a lady whisper to me. But it's so I don't know if it's healthy or not. But Mr. Robbins, you have no ASMR response, right?
No, nothing that I've noticed at all.
So it just sounds to you like it's utterly bizarre, right? That anybody would watch this shit.
Yeah, truly.
And perhaps the most bizarre thing was when I told you that I got like ASMR sensations from like my coworkers at work, the dudes that train me.
Yeah, well, yes. Not only the sensations, but to add to that, the source of said sensations.
Yeah, well, it's like there was one guy who was training me, Bob. He had a very gentle voice and he was telling me like what he eats. And he's like, I take a few nuts and then I put it with my granola and then I add a little coconut milk. Anyway, I forget what he was saying, but yeah, when certain things like that they trigger that response, I often wonder like if you want like a bullshit explanation to it, like a bullshit, completely unscientific guess. I think like when you're a child, there has to be some reward mechanism for you to pay attention to your mother or somebody who like to like when you're not necessarily being fed, for you to like focus your attention. And maybe there is a reward mechanism because it seems to be activated when somebody is like pointing things out or talking softly. Like it sounds like maybe it's like a reward a mechanism from your infancy that is like dies out in some people. And maybe Mr. Robbins, maybe that's why some people are autistic. They don't have the ASMR mechanism when they're kids, and that's why they don't make eye contact. Fucking solved it.
Some sneaky in the chat is asking, just whispering or food noises, which affect you the most?
Just whispering. I mean, food noises and different noises don't affect me at all. And I notice like with different ASMR ladies, I mean, I can get like ASMR from a dude, but I'm 110% heterosexual. I'm waiting for that. I think that Tulsi Gabbard should start doing ASMR. Like, I went to see Assad, and he seemed like a nice guy. I realize he has his flaws, but I don't think we should get into. We should manage the affairs of the Middle East with our blood and treasure. And that's everybody's going to get the tingles and vote for her eventually. But yeah, I don't, I notice that I do develop like resistance, almost like ASMR resistance to ladies. Like I listen to them for a while, and it's like sometimes like when I find out personal details about them, and I don't try to find them out, but if they kind of come out in the channel or whatever, like somehow like this kind of interferes with the whole kind of a thing. I'm not sure that there's another creepy dimension, but yes. So I guess thinking about like this, maybe it should be included over there. Mr. Robbins, let's go for the next question.
Okay, Patreon member Raymond says, if Bernie Sanders won the presidency, do you think he would put a Christmas tree up in the White House for Christmas?
I think that Bernie should just sort of really kind of personally put up a big nativity scene display. And personally, him and like 3 rabbis should carry baby Jesus, kind of slowly and reverentially, like in an opera or something, to his resting place there. And just say, hey, very close to being the Messiah, very close. This kind of a margin, right? Just as much of the margin of the portion of the 1%, Mr. Robbins, who relative to 100 that rules the capital and controls our economy. In the same way, Bernie will say, in the same way, this is how close Jesus is to being the Messiah. I don't want him to go all the way. I just want him to really acknowledge the Christian heritage. Enough with the Judeo. Let's kind of focus on Jesus. Would that satisfy you as the son of the Midwest, Mr. Robbins?
Yes, I would be comfortable with that.
It's the least we can ask for. So what is the next question?
Noah asks, do you know of any style hacks that only the experts know?
Style hacks. Well, of course, there is the old sock in your underwear. That's kind of a style hack that I always do, and just sit there nonchalantly manspreading. Women pretend that it doesn't matter and that they're not transfixed. But yeah, I mean, it's if you're already like super obese, it's already kind of pointless to do that. But yeah, aside from that, Mr. Robbins, sock in the pants.
Lifts in the shoes.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of less dramatic and could be easily discovered.
I read something today about making your, or not today, but recently, about trying to make your hips look slimmer. Mm-hmm. Something about maybe dark on the bottom and vertical stripes on top.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a little shoulder pads. I really like to Yeah, I just kind of like to sometimes like smear some ketchup on myself because just kind of walk around in a t-shirt with dried ketchup because it's like it makes ladies notice you and think you're maybe a little bit dangerous, a little on the wild side. You can't handle your condiments, you know.
Gotcha.
Yep. So next question.
Inga asks, I am fascinated by the avatars creators use for themselves when they are not images of their faces. What made you choose the devil woodcut from The Prodigal Daughter? It occurs to me you may not be aware of where this image comes from. It is rather ubiquitous in certain communities with an interest in such things. And generally, there are very few who know what the prodigal daughter is. At any rate, it's a kind of cool piece of 18th century East Coast Americana and comes complete with the substance of a sermon preached on the occasion by the Reverend Mr. Williams from Luke, I think that's 15:24, which is, as it happens, for his son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. And I thought after watching your My Life with Bipolar Disorder videos, which I'm still having feels about, it was kind of strangely serendipitously benefiting. Or ironic, maybe, or maybe your avatar was a dark commentary on the nature of bipolar or not. Would love to know. Really enjoying your content. Thank you.
Yes, so I do have a certain kind of a goth theme to my channel, like a dark theme, because we're kind of in the gutter and I'm drifting through life in kind of like with like a heavy sack of like rotten nihilistic meat. And so in that kind of that's where that idea came from for a sort of avatar like that. I didn't put a ton of thought into it. I just was looking for kind of bleak images like that. But I think the devil, a kind of a one-dimensional picture of a devil. I mean, you do have an idea of like puncturing illusions or disassembling narratives, Mr. Robbins, archetypally speaking, because that's what the devil did, right? There was a sweet narrative, and then the devil fucking tempted the dame out of it. Would you say that this is a nice biblical interpretation?
I would agree.
Yeah, I would say that I was asked this before, but the reason I decided to answer it again because the question was well written, and I do like this verse. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again; he was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. And that I would say that this is like the best part of Christianity. Like I'm very disconnected from Christianity at this point, but this kind of ambiguity around Jesus' suffering and this kind of a paradox, I mean, that's a really something really unique to Christianity. Like I find a lot of the other stories in the Bible or in like from my impression overall, like the Quran or the Old Testament, they seem to be, I mean, well, I guess the sacrifice of Adam, but I mean, it's really kind of, I think this is like the reason why so much of Western literature is so good. Not to say that other literature isn't good, but this is a kind of a spark of contradiction that is pretty beautiful. I mean, I don't know in which way it relates to me. As for myself, Mr. Robbins, I mean, I think that um, I'm not exactly. Um, I was more alive before. Now I'm kind of more dead, I guess, because like I go to the store and I just kind of um, there isn't a linear point of cohesion. So I think about like death. I want to die in the morning. I go to the store, and then as I'm driving away from the store, I start thinking about my Buddhist society, the Dominion. I don't want to think about it, but it gives me meaning, and yet I know that it's a kind of a sign of delusion and insanity. And with when this kind of goes on day in and day out, a kind of a line of cohesion uh, is broken, and though you are sane, there is a kind of uh, you're kind of technically sane, and you kind of want, a part of me kind of wants that organic ride of not being aware of it and just kind of believing that I will start the Dominion or something, or just kind of living with these hopes and then plunging into the depression, but it would be very dysfunctional. So I'm not sure that I have been resurrected. All right, Mr. Robbins, are these the last of the questions?
Yeah, I do believe that's it.
All right, so before we wrap up here, I did want to do a quick investigation. A completely sort of a pointless, and people have been asking me, Mr. Robbins, what have I, whether, and I do apologize if I missed any questions from any patrons. Thank you for being patrons, my friends. But I do apologize. I grabbed the ones that I saw. So I guess I'll conclude with this. People have asked me about the Zizek slash
Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, Peterson debate, and naturally I haven't watched it. Now, I've often told people that I actually am completely opportunistic and I don't care about this stuff. But here, with something of this magnitude concerning the professor, I really should have seen it as part of my professional responsibilities to watch it, and yet I haven't. I am a failure. I am a fail son and a fail YouTube dad. However, I have been watching something else, and that's Jeff Nippard, whatever, a Canadian bodylifting YouTuber who is really, he's a science bro. He follows the science. And for some reason, I just became kind of preoccupied with his videos, especially ones that have nothing to do with weightlifting and concern his relationship with his hot girlfriend, Stephanie Buttermore, which I think is her literal name. And it's kind of strange because both of them are kind of yuppies, and yet they're so exhibitionist in certain ways when it comes to their bodies. And so today we will examine their bodies, Mr. Robbins, but particularly his. We're going to really focus on Jeff. And
Okay.
we're going to ask the question, is Jeff natural, okay?
I'm ready.
Right. Does Jeff hit the juice? Have you seen Jeff before, Mr. Robbins?
No, I've not.
All right. So I want your totally uninformed opinion, stated strongly, no beating around the bush. Is Jeff natural, all right? We're going to look at Jeff's physique, and we're going to make the call, right, Mr. Robbins?
I'm ready.
All right.
My gut reaction.
Let's see. I do have a history of shutting down. All right. Are you seeing it, right?
Yep.
All right. So this is Jeff and his beautiful lady friend.
To show you guys that we actually both did a physique update this morning. So I will roll what we are both looking like. We both actually did weigh in. So
all right, Mr. Robbins, thoughts? Jeff, does he look natural or?
I'm going to say that could be natural. I'll say yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, I am kind of skeptical because what makes me skeptical is the waist to shoulder ratio here.
Okay.
I mean, his waist is extraordinary small compared to his shoulders. And I mean, I know that, yeah, and I don't know, I have my doubts, Mr. Robbins, I have my doubts. But you went with being natural. You trust Jeff.
I do. I mean, I don't see all of that swollenness of those guys who are, really roided up.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to really be roided up. That's the thing. You don't have to take the maximum amount. And Jeff is the type of a sneaky fuck. Jeff knows his fucking fitness science, and he's the type of a sneaky fuck who would. Now, the one reason I don't know anything about steroids, but I know that if you take them for a long time, you your natural testosterone stops being produced by your body, and then you have to take the synthetic shit for the rest of your life.
Correct.
And I don't know how that would work if you just had a little bit of testosterone, you know, or like if he used it at some point in his life, and then later on he retained some of the benefits from it, even if he's not using it now. But I think that I don't quite believe it, because I think when you have pronounced muscles like that, he would need to be at a lower body fat, like he would be skinnier than he is now, to have such pronounced muscles and to have such discrepancy between waist and shoulders. But I could be wrong, you know. Maybe Jeff is natural, you know. All right, so this is going to be when they're eating. This is actually from her channel, and this is what she does. Like, she eats a lot. But Mr. Robbins, let's examine something else here. A kind of a ethical question, or a question of comfort.
The really high reps, you kind of start losing it in your glutes, and other muscles start to take over. So you kind of stay in that range.
And how many like a pre-activation exercise do you want to do? Because you don't want to get too tired, or?
Well, that's a great question, because the next movement we do is going to be more compound in nature. So you want everything firing, but you don't want to be exhausted.
Right.
So what we're going to do is 3 working sets of 12. Hold. Right there. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and now give me body weight. Give me body weight. Give me body weight. Give me body weight. Let's go. Come on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. You're done. Good job. That's it. Good job. That's it.
All right, Mr. Robbins.
So what's our ethical dilemma here?
Well, it's of course the oldest one of all, the one that goes back to the ancients, and that's yoga pants. Would you be comfortable? And of course, we here at the stream, this is a total consent stream, and we recognize the lady's right to wear whatever she wants, anytime she wants. But would you be comfortable if your lady friend like wore yoga pants like that to the gym?
Oh, no, I probably wouldn't. Not my lady friend. Obviously, it would attract a lot of attention.
Yeah, it would. In fact, just the other day, I was leaving the gym, and there was an attractive young lady walking out, and I gave kind of a cursory glance, because I'm not an objectifier. But there was a dude like walking behind her, 2 dudes, and one of them was really staring at her in a predatory kind of creepy way, with that kind of creepy male intensity that you should really work to suppress within yourself, if you still got it, which somebody like me who barely has a will to live doesn't. Well, anyway, fuck it. Yeah, so it's just kind of like yoga pants, man. Yoga pants. I was reading also like recently a New York Times article about this important topic, and then and the guy was making a case for yoga pants, how they're liberating, and then there was like all these comment sections filled with different people who were making a case for yoga pants as being a liberating garment, and it has never occurred to me as such. It's just a question of my narrow-mindedness, that I always just thought it was primarily worn to highlight the form, because it's unimaginable for me to wear yoga pants for comfort, but maybe it's because of my kind of patriarchal conditioning. Mr. Robbins, imagine putting on a pair of yoga pants and heading to work.
No, I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine that being, well, it's almost, would you feel vulnerable, aside from like the gender nonconformism that we don't have the balls to undertake, would you feel kind of vulnerable, maybe like wearing like such tight?
I would. There's a sense of comfort and protection that comes with regular pants with denim or khaki. Definitely.
Yeah, and the cargo. I guess people were making the case almost. I mean, they weren't using those words, but they almost made the case that like yoga pants are like cargo shorts for women. Like it's like bros, like I wear cargo shorts. Some fucking yuppies say you don't need all these pockets, motherfuckers. I vape. I need to have this and my juice bottles. I need those fucking cargo short pockets. Motherfucking yuppies, fuck you. Anyway, so this is a kind of a comfort food, a comfort item, yoga pants. Mr. Robbins, what do you think? Are we deluded? Have you thought of yoga pants as like an shape enhancing attribute primarily?
Oh, without question, yes. I think this came up in a stream a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, of seeing a lady at the gas pump and getting caught making some inappropriate glances. So,
yes, thanks for bringing up this bit of creepiness, Mr. Robbins, that should have been abandoned in whatever shitty stream that it was in. But yes, I guess it was a revelation for me personally. I don't interact with ladies and know why they wear yoga pants. I suppose I can ask my mom. I guess I could ask my mom. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a revelation that this would be an item of comfort. But on the other hand, it's like if a lady could wear them, maybe our society is not so regressive that you don't feel vulnerable wearing something like that. But who knows? Everything sucks. Everything's racist, I guess. Okay, so I mean, I'm not. A lot of things suck, and a lot of things are racist. To be clear. All right, Mr. Robbins. These are the travels of a working class driver. Are you seeing this?
uh-huh.
Yes, this is what goes on. Just kind of flooded here. This is my life. I travel here in these back alleys and collect urine and blood here. This is my life. Okay. And this, Mr. Robbins, you see what's going on here?
Yeah, looks like some people are subverting the traffic system there.
Yep, and I'm one of them. And
good job.
Yeah, well, what happened was that this is a one lane on the bridge here. It's actually that bridge, that goes to Eastgate. Is this like 275 or? You probably have crossed. This is the Ohio to Kentucky, going from Kentucky to Ohio toward Eastgate. Well, fuck it. Fuck you, Mr. Robbins, all right? And this is also another scene from my driving here. I actually took this picture because there was supposed to be a box here for me to open, but there wasn't this time, so that's what's up. So this is just kind of existential entries into the life of a working class driver. But there was something else I wanted to share with you, and this is a story that really touched Mr. Robbins's heart. Or at least pulled on some of his outrage strings. So it says, "Ooh la la, French actor Vincent Cassel, 51, and his model wife Tina Kunaki, 21, share a kiss after tying the knot in a low-key ceremony." So a very beautiful lady here, no doubt about it. Very happy, seemingly, with her very beautiful lady. Mr. Robbins, why did you send me this fucking link?
Well, I was just curious as to your thoughts. What's going on here? I mean, is this Is this strictly, you know?
Mr. Robbins, I don't object to interracial marriages.
Well, no, it has nothing to do with race. It's more to do with age.
Yeah.
What would a woman her age and of her beauty see in a man like him? I mean, obviously he's famous and wealthy, but is that the primary draw there, or do you think it's true love?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. Robbins, you objected to it. Voice your fucking objection. You said, why can't people just marry normal people in their own age?
Well, I would question why so often, like rock stars, actors, famous people, athletes, tend to go after models. And obviously they're beautiful. I can understand that, but what is it that they don't go after, like a really, really attractive, just normal person? Because they exist. I
mean, because they're hot. I mean, it's kind of an interesting question because it seems so obvious to answer. But I mean, you made me. I mean, you're kind of pulling a Peterson here because it's like the answer is because they're hot, and then those are the circles they move in. But I don't know that they always do go. Well, I don't know what percentage of them goes for models. I mean, you have to. We would need to have a statistical analysis. But Mr. Robbins, let's just forget them and focus on the age gap. You object to it, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, if they want to get
a bit of revulsion. If I told you, oh, I'm dating like a 19-year-old, you would have a little bit of revulsion there.
I mean, if I felt that it was a mutually beneficial, a happy, non-exploitative relationship between the two of you, I would be happy for the both of you. Okay. But I guess when I see these like big age gaps between these beautiful women and men who are successful, but at that age are probably far less physically attractive, I think there's something else going on. It more than just it being a matter of love. In her case, I suspect, oh, he gets the trophy, he gets the prize. It's like, look at what I can get, and she probably gets, some sense of stability with him, financial stability. And the fact that he's a celebrity, she's still, probably going to be able to, circulate within some, higher class circles. So it all works out in a way. It's mutually beneficial, but I wonder how much of it is really love.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, I think that, well, people are kind of, people realistically are superficial in their dating standards anyway. So it's like, yeah, people have their criteria even if they don't always acknowledge it. I feel people are pretty superficial, and it makes sense to be superficial to some degree and to have kind of specific criteria because it's a huge investment, the relationship, and especially from a point of view of like evolution, what it entails. And so this is just another set of criteria that some people find advantageous, some women do. I mean, this is a minority of women because kind of a lot of women are creeped out by this, but by these age gaps. But I think that there are kind of women who find that security of being a big turn on. Like, and again, like there are fucked up things with men too, or things that could be categorized. And like some women like really get turned on by the idea of getting pregnant, for example. and they enjoy sex much more, and that kind of with that kind of mentality. And again, I'm just kind of making generalizations, and this is like one of those things that I think that some woman, like an older man, presents a sense of confidence, perhaps, even if it's an illusion of confidence and financial security that genuinely turns them on. Because if you look at her, she's genuinely happy in every single picture over there. So, I mean, you could call it a father complex. I don't believe in the Freudian shit, but I think there is a subset, a minority of women who get turned on by it. And then if you watch enough Netflix series together, whatever, you'll have things to talk about. I mean, what is there to talk about in this dumb fucking life? Like what you eat, some shitty movie you watched, what's going on with the family or whatever the fuck. I mean, there's not really that much to talk about in this dumb life. And so an age gap can be closed that way. But yeah, I do think that they are genuine relationships because people have just radically different criteria from yours. But I don't know, most people aren't psychopaths, and even if you're attracted to a lady, you will still. I mean, I guess there is an issue I have personally where when I see an attractive woman, I start to project qualities on her, a kind of celestial qualities that she, likelihood doesn't possess, or maybe not to that degree. And that I do find kind of disturbing, the kind of mixing in your head of uh, physical attractiveness and some other qualities that really have nothing to do in it that you start to project through your sexual desire. It's something I touched upon in the Stefan Molyneux video, where it's like that character from Citizen Kane saw a woman once, and there could be nothing more to it aside from physical desire or physical attractiveness. And yet, the second after that desire, he started projecting onto her this longing, these needs, this kind of something about her. And she became a permanent feature of his reality. And it's a powerful scene in the movie because it resonates, because you do feel a purely sexual or like a photogenic kind of attractive draw to a woman, and suddenly she becomes like some sort of a goddess imbued with magical qualities. And like there were, well, anyway, I guess there were women kind of, well, anyway, fucking don't want to go there, but yeah, that aspect of it is more disturbing to me. Or how would I, because unfortunately unfortunately, I do have superficial like physical standards, and like I said 100 times before, I'm fine with being rejected and fine that I don't fit in other people's superficial standards, and I don't necessarily want to have these standards. It's just the way I'm wired for whatever reason, and like I do have certain incoherent standards, narrow, that make me, I think, attracted to a smaller portion of women than I would be otherwise. Like, it's just odd to me that when I look at all of my friends, like basically I find none of their like mates desirable. And that's kind of odd. And it seems like I would like find somebody desirable, but I have no, well, whatever, well, fuck it. And I kind of I don't like that superficiality about myself. And because I wonder, like, what if I was with a pretty lady and then some aspect of her changed, and while I would retain my affection, I'm kind of haunted by this merging of desire and the projection of something profound that happens simultaneously with it. Mr. Robbins, are you haunted by these things?
No, not anymore. I probably was when I was younger. There was a mystique to certain girls who presented themselves a certain way, and then I kind of got over it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll get over it. It seems like this one is set for life. All right, Mr. Robbins, let's conclude with a bit of old news from Columbus, Ohio, that has been suggested we comment on this by patron Raymond, who pitched this article to me a while back, and it has lodged itself in my mind. And Mr. Robbins, are you ready to read it?
Yep, I can read the whole thing. Okay, this dates from November 14th, 2005, Columbus, Ohio. 2 state liquor control agents had sex with a woman who wanted a career in law enforcement, then helped give her another woman's identity so she could go undercover as an exotic dancer, a newspaper reported. Informant Michelle Shijwa, 25, also used the other woman's driver's license when she was pulled over by a state trooper, according to a state highway patrol report. The Columbus Dispatch obtained the report from the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office through an open records request. Troy police removed agents Chad Fannin, 33.
Chad, he's literally named Chad.
And Gavin Stanton, 34, from the 2003 string after the agent said they had sex with Sujwa before they started investigating the Total Exposure nightclub in Troy, according to the newspaper. The officers, Fannin and Stanton, were fired this summer for conduct unbecoming officers and failure to perform their duties. Both have filed union grievances in response to the firing. The grand jury last month declined to indict anyone in the case. Sujwan was issued a traffic ticket after she left the nightclub on March 23, 2003, according to the patrol report. She asked if she could get out of her vehicle when she was pulled over, but the trooper told her to stay in the car, she told investigators. Another nightclub employee was in the car with her at the time of the ticket, and Shujwa didn't want to blow her cover, according to the patrol report. Troy police contacted the patrol the next day, and a new ticket was issued for Shujwa's name. She paid $95 for failing to wear a seatbelt. She had no comment about the investigation or the ticket Sunday. Listings could not be found for Fannin or Stanton, but a union spokesman told the Dispatch that the two would not comment. Shujwa, then a 22-year-old criminal justice major at the University of Dayton, worked as an intern in the U.S. Marshal Service and in a security post with the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland. She is a police officer with the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. She told investigators that she wanted to be a waitress at the club, but Miami County Prosecutor Gary Nasel insisted she be a stripper. Shujwa said she acquiesced but asked for a fake name. State law prohibits serving alcohol in bars where there is nude dancing. Members of private clubs, which don't have liquor licenses, can bring their own alcohol and pay the club a servicing fee. Troy police sought help for investigating allegations of drug dealing and prosecution at the nightclub because 7 of its own 43 officers were members there, according to the patrol report. We're having fun. Troy Police Chief Charles Phelps said authorities didn't ask if officers who were members what was going on because they didn't want the club to know they were investigating it. The club has since closed.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Robbins, I mean, they were investigating it, and they just sort of, they were both investigating it, and they formed the whole club. The whole club was just a bunch of cops investigating it. Going deep undercover. But I will say that, my friends, you dismiss the words of Carl Benjamin at your own peril when it comes to how to score with the ladies. These were 2 Chad officers who took the initiative and enrolled in the police academy, and now they were fucking getting laid, you know, meeting ladies at the job, and you know, where else can you tell a lady, hey, go be a stripper? I mean, they really started fucking acting like pimps over there. Mr. Robbins, reflection, does this kind of encourage your entry maybe into the law enforcement field to shake things up and add a little bit of that alpha quotient into the smoothie of your life?
No, I don't think I'm prepared for that at all.
Adam Carolla, the kind of conservative comedian, like the one insightful thing that he said back in the day in his shitty a Loveline podcast radio he had with Dr. Drew, these two assholes. For some reason I used to listen to them. Well, I was a fucking teen. Well, anyway, and the one good thing that he did say is that he said, cops and criminals, like there's only so many like degrees of separation within them. It's like brother can be a cop and a criminal, like they're all kind of attracted to that life. And yeah, that's why you need to have checks and balances on cops, because that's what they're prone to do. They're prone to go into the shade when they can. And I feel bad for this girl. Sounds like she was pretty young, like wanted to get into the law enforcement field and met these two creepy cops and maybe saw them as like some authority figures and as badasses, and they just started acting like pimps, and now they're fucking filing union grievances.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add to it. Yeah, sounds like she got into a pretty bad situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it is kind of sad because people really, I mean, she was in her early 20s, right?
Yeah, and all in all, I mean, she was young and probably pretty wide-eyed and ambitious and got sucked into something that was exploitative.
Yeah, and I like how they're like fixated on this one club. They're like 10 people, 10 of the members are like cops, half of the department, and they're like a new stripper there. So we can get another angle on this club. It's just so stupid. Like that's what they all fucking did. They're like, hey, I got this girl, and she's also she's gonna be an undercover stripper, and they're like, oh, that's fucking great. We're already here fucking 24/7. Well, anyway, Mr. Robbins, let's conclude with the name of the stream: watching cathedrals burn. We did watch Notre Dame and burn. I can't even pronounce it. And you felt nothing, Mr. Robbins. Describe your hollow response to it, and whether you felt guilt for being disconnected from our European heritage.
Yeah, from our civilization. Yeah, I started to see a little bit of the footage and just didn't really have much of a reaction to it. Remained kind of distant from it. Thought, if there's really something newsworthy about this, it'll come out sooner or later, and at that point, I guess I'll pay some attention to it. But I didn't have much of any kind of emotional reaction to it or not. And I've since talked to people who did and kind of tried to get a handle on
who did.
A lady I know, I'm pretty close to, said that it almost brought her to tears.
Oh, wow.
And I said, and I thought she was sincere. She's a sincere person. And I said, what is this? I mean, what's your emotional connection to this place? You've never been there. You've never seen it. You've never, I'm having a hard time understanding it. And she said, well, it's more or less, a significant part of our civilization that we've lost. And I can understand that, but I had no emotional reaction to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I'm predisposed toward being religious, but on the other hand, like I can't sustain religiosity because I just kind of start doubting things. But it's a strong drive in me, and I was an Orthodox Christian, a teen Christian. I did go to communion, even though none of my family did. Fasted and stuff like that, and then I kind of moved away from it, but I still had theistic things in the back of my head. Again, connected with my bipolar and a sense of destiny, I still felt like a sense of cohesion from a higher source, even if I didn't explicitly believe in it. And then when I became a Buddhist, and this is precisely when like the idea of God died for me completely, because here you had a schema. I'm not going to get into all of Buddhism, but essentially there is no God. There are Buddhist hells, in fact, but again, Buddha doesn't want you there. He would never send you there to this Buddhist hell. It's just because of your actions are going to attract your mind stream to those realms. So you kind of send yourself there, and Buddha doesn't want anybody to suffer and loves everybody equally. And that's kind of the definition of universal love, when you actually have no agenda for them, unlike with God. And since then, like, the idea of God has become more colder and more foreign to me. So ironically, I'm kind of like a cultural Buddhist just because of the intensity of things that I connected with it. And so like these cathedrals and churches, they just feel so foreign to me. It's like the premise in Buddhism is that the Buddha presented this way of getting out of the cycle of suffering and reincarnation, the cycle of rebirth. However, the Buddha doesn't care if you worship him or not. He has the same regard for somebody who worships him and somebody who doesn't. He doesn't want your offering. Whereas by contrast, this idea of God, a kind of a celestial hierarchy where he created a world effectively for these ants to worship him. I mean, that's kind of a simplification, and you could say that worship in and of itself is just a facade for connecting to the higher truth. You're not actually in a coherent hierarchy as much as this is just one level of reality with which we can relate, through which we enter a higher communion with existence. Nevertheless, that's not kind of the way realistically most Christians interact with it. And there is also like this kind of there is no Buddhist guilt, like you've noticed from whatever you make of these passages that I read at the beginning of the stream from that Bhutanese Lama. And I actually don't like Bhutan. I don't like them too much. But anyway, Tibet all the way, motherfuckers. Bhutanese actually closed the border during the huge Tibetan exodus after the Chinese invasion, even though they're like basically the same ethnicity and they have basically the same religion. The fucking Bhutanese closed the border on them, which is pretty wild, and hardly let anybody through to India or to Bhutan. And they also expelled a large number of Nepalese migrants forcefully out of Bhutan, kind of like the Burmese did. Burmese, this is what Buddhists, I guess, do sometimes, is ethnic cleansing. But I don't think Bhutanese was as brutal, but it still was pretty bad. So anyway, Bhutan. Well, anyway, I get distracted. But there isn't that sense of like guilt relative to the Buddha. There is no like pure Buddhist guilt. And so I just sort of associate like Tibetan Buddhism with a kind of a lightness and a kind of a kind of playfulness and like a different kind of engagement, if you like, even like if you want to look at it purely as a fairy tale, a more interesting and dynamic, alive fairy tale without this idea of where's my justice from the universal sovereign, when there is no justice and the world is unfair and defined by suffering, as the Buddha taught, but you still kind of have a levity there. So for that reason, I just don't relate to the Christian civilization at all, to the concept of God. I'm not even like a cultural Christian or even like a somebody vaguely related to Christianity anymore. Like I just don't relate to it. And so the burning of the cathedral, I really felt nothing but I think that hollowness, it's good to experience things, Mr. Robbins. It's bad to have this hollowness when cathedrals burn.
Yeah, it's probably not a good feeling, but now that I think about it, it was a few years ago, and I stumbled upon a Catholic church in New York. I think it was like St. John the Baptist or something. And it really was very, very impressive. And come to think of it, you know, if I were to see or get word that something like that was destroyed, I probably would feel a little bit differently, I guess, just from the experience of having really experienced it.
Well, the thing is that it wasn't destroyed. I mean, parts of it were destroyed, but I mean, the unique artwork has survived, and so, I mean, it's just structurally they would need to rebuild it. I mean, it is a glorious building. It is a really impressive, hugely impressive cultural and architectural achievement for the Middle Ages. I mean, or wherever it was built, fuck it. But yeah, I mean, Catholic Church is nice for creating artwork. I mean, that's one of the things I don't like about Protestants, especially like these Protestant churches all look like warehouses, and they literally are. Even like when I go to these Catholic hospitals, like they put little artworks everywhere and little reproductions in the big holes, and it's just kind of a nice touch. They're not like the corny fucking smiling Nutella Jesus you see in like. Unfortunately, like the black Protestants have contributed a lot to music, etc. But unfortunately, white Protestants really kind of. I do have a certain bias for old, you know, Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity and uh, black churches because they seem to have a kind of a cultural aesthetic in a sense that is just like plain bread with the Protestants. Like all their churches could burn down. The new ones, okay, there are some good old ones, but you know, like humanity would lose nothing.
Yeah, there's just nothing very spiritual about a strip mall church.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Robbins. The cathedrals have burned, but and so has the stupid stream has burnt out as well. And I will say that to whoever, if it means to you, happy Easter. And I don't know, let's try to have compassion for other people. There is a lot of suffering around. Mr. Robbins, final thoughts?
Same thing. Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank you for watching.